Are you listening?
Are you listening?
Listening.
Are
You.
Listening.
One simple
voice?
One simple voice.
One simple voice.
Our vision is a world where there is peace and harmony as every soul listens to the voice of God. To bring that vision to reality, we assist people who desire to begin or enhance their transformation to a life of sacred wisdom, peace, love, and union with God.
Franny uses the term breadcrumbs, and for me I use the word little tugs, and they're always there, and really you could say a great part of the journey is learning to listen or feel these little tugs, and they happen all the time. And Peggy, my wife, and I I've learned to try and listen for these and to follow the little tugs. And it just invariably there's a lesson or a gift to be received. But you imagine you spent most of your life, I'm sure those tugs were there, and a few of them you felt, you responded to. And so you have to, you want to get, part of the process is getting smarter and more sensitive at feeling those things. And journaling is a very important part of the process, and Franny Rose is a stern disciplinarian when it comes to journaling. But you have to be careful, because you spent your whole life in work and as a husband, as a son, with a list of things that you had to do and had to do well. All of us. We had our careers, we had all these things, and we had a list of things. These are the things that I have to do well. And at the end of the day, you would say, you know, I didn't do too well on this one, or I got an A here, but a C- here. And journaling is different, because journaling is a quiet and receptive process. It's not the writing, but the listening and the hearing, these understanding for yourself and hearing wisdom or that's a good word, understanding that's coming in. And so it's a little different. It's a quiet and a receptive process. The journaling in a way is incidental. You're recording or you're writing down. Drawing could be singing, or it could be, everyone is different. It's a little bit like fitness. Each of us has a program that works for them. I work out this way, someone does it at home, someone goes to the gym, and you can't tell someone else, here, I've learned this, do it my way. Everyone has to find their own way. Call it inner fitness, maybe. And journaling, or some version of quietly listening and hearing this wisdom that's there, which is, could be God speaking to you. There could be, everyone might have their own way of describing what that process is, but it's quiet listening and writing that down, or journaling is, for me, a crucial part of that. And I was resistant. I was dragged screaming to the journaling process, but now I'm a firm convert.
I hated journaling. I taught it in previous ministries that I had. I'd have other people do it, and I would bring speakers in to teach them how to do it. But I absolutely, positively hated it, and I never did it in my whole life until I retired. And the reason I didn't want to do it is that I cannot spell. And people think, oh yeah, nobody cares. Well, yes, you do care if you can't spell. And it was worse looking at my own inability to have to look at that and try to read that. But I promised God when I retired, I left work in 2007. I promised God that I would journal every day of my life if I only wrote the date and how I felt or what I was doing. And except for when I was ill, I've kept that promise. And it wasn't easy, because I don't enjoy writing. But the way the journal helps you is that you can go back and see where you've come from. You don't know where you're going. If you have faith and trust in God, you know it can only get better and better. You can only have a greater sense of union with God. But if you go back when you get stuck or you're tempted to be discouraged, you can go back and actually read where you were at one point and where you are now. And you can go back if your mind wants to take what God has said to you away, you can go back and read it. When I get hard on myself, I have little tags on my notebook. I know right where to go to read again that God has unconditional love for me, and that He has loved me and He will never stop loving me. And that gives me the peace and the courage then to go forward. So it's a tool, and I didn't like it, and I fussed about it, but I have been faithful to it.
And she started to ask me to journal every morning, to journal with God, to sit down and share my thoughts with my Creator and with God who loves me, and then take some time and ask Him questions and ask God to speak back to you. And I remember about the first week doing that, I thought to myself, I don't know, this is crazy. This is crazy. But I kept doing it. I thought it's going to work. I kept doing it. And the more I did it, the more meaningful it became as I sat down every morning to do this. And I'd do it as soon as I get out of bed in the morning. And I would ask him questions, and he would respond to those questions and things. Well, that was all well and good. And then things start to happen. It's the strangest thing in the world. I mean, I thought this God, the way we talked and things, I thought this God was going to appear to me or touch me or talk to me physically. That's not the way it worked. And I remember journaling with God and saying, God, I want you in my life. I want you to be part of my life. I want you to help me. I want you to really, I want to feel you in my life. Feel you from the bottom of my heart. And I began to see Fanny for a couple of months, and things began to happen. And not the way I would plan it. I mean, I wouldn't say to God, give me this or give me that. It was very subtle things began to happen. Changes began to happen. And it was like it opened a whole world to me that I had not experienced or known before.
I was resistant to journaling. It's hard for me, but it's become something that's important in the sense that if I don't do it, it's not as good a day. And this kind of transformation is not, I mean, it's something that has to be renewed all the time, which is sort of a drag. It would be great to just get there. But it's the journaling that anchors me in the present from the get-go. And I write this every morning, anchor in the present and let go of worry, because my life prior to this was pretty much caught up in worrying about the future. And plenty of regret for the past, and I really don't do that anymore, and journaling is part of it. If I don't do that, I can get off track pretty quickly. So I think that that's the link in this, the discipline of having the conversation, whether it's the God conversation or the conversation with my better self, who's there, but not very evident at first thing in the morning.
Using Fanny's teachings, I journal every day. I'm not a journaling person. I always thought journaling was boring. I thought it was something that people did in movies or TV shows. They kept a little journal, Lewis and Clark. Couldn't relate. What I find is that I look forward to my cup of coffee and my journaling. I talk to God, I get answers, I surrender things to Him. And I think that's the key that I found, is surrendering. By being able to surrender things you can't control or you can't solve, you're able to let go. And if you truly surrender them, then changes happen. Incredible changes happen. Fear goes away. You aren't worrying about events at work or in your personal life. You're surrendering those to God. You're trusting in Him to take care of you through those. He tells you that He will, and things happen. I used to think about synchronicities, as we would call them. They're not synchronicities. Everything happens for a reason. And so when you run into someone you've never met before and you hit it off immediately, you see a relative in the middle of New York City on a street, that's God's plan, that's God's path. Those things just aren't a coincidence. So I see those in work every day. I relate to people much, much more love than I did before. I'm able to impact people at work. I'm able to influence things. I'm able to take people who other folks consider difficult or hard to deal with and deal with them very professionally and successfully. So One Simple Voice has changed everything I do in how I approach the world and life.
Not too long ago, I sat down and went through not every page, but the beginning of it and what I was experiencing and things of this sort. And I honestly thought God was going to touch me and change my life in a different way, that it was going to be very dramatic and things were going to happen and I may even see him. And I kept asking for these miracles and things. Never happened, not that early point. Some things happened, and I thought, I don't know about this, so I'll continue or not. And then things happened. So looking back on it, I think, because Fanny would always say, you know, God will touch you. You'll change. God will be with you. And it'll be very subtle. It's an amazing experience to go through this process. It really is a process. And it's a process where you look and you're vigilant. And you know, once you're convinced God is in your heart, once you're convinced he's with you and you're with him, it's an amazing experience. When I started this whole journey, I thought it was going to be a different thing altogether. I don't know what that was going to be, but it wasn't what it was. God is very, how do I say this, subtle in his love in many ways at the beginning. And then it doesn't become so subtle, then it becomes very, very real in your heart. And it grows in your heart every day. Without this experience, I say it's the greatest gift I received, and it is. Without this experience, I would have went on, and life was fine. I have a great life, everything's fine. But there wasn't meaning. There wasn't that touch, that meaning in my life that this amazing God brought. And he makes changes without knowing about it. He transforms you. You think you transform yourself. You don't. You just give it to him. He transforms you, but you have to be open. And it's not always easy to do that.
I do read back on it. Went through cancer about a year ago, and very painful to look back on that writing. But the process at that time of letting go of the worry, the gifts that this has given me to get through a very tough time, I think that turned me around on the journaling. So I stuck with it, not every single day, but pretty much, and it does help me. So I write those very simple things down: anchor in the present, I draw a little heart, just give, and so that it brings me back to the basics.